there's a reason why you do what you do. There's a reason why you think the way you think, the way you feel. There's a reason for those things. And it's because of these foundational ideas that motivate and drive these things. Most people, whether they realize it or not, if you ask them what's your worldview, a lot of people would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? But everybody operates from some form of those building blocks. Everybody has on a pair of glasses. Everybody. The way they view the world is influenced by what glasses you're wearing. And so we're going to take, and the other concept that some of the phrases that he said I really liked were this idea of that we are definitely a worldview minority. And notice when he was talking about those who hold a biblical worldview and the parameters are set with 6%, right? So, and he laid this out as well. If from there, if we want to talk about things that are particular to understanding salvation and things like the doctrine of baptism or what faith is and repentance and all these things that are spelled out in scriptures, that number is only going to get smaller. And it illustrates to us the scriptures that say something about a wide road and a narrow way. You know, and that's an unfortunate set of circumstances as to those realities. And the perspective that we have there is really summed up by the idea, well, we are a worldview minority, but that means we need to be worldview missionaries. And so we have an incredible opportunity. And there's been things, our society kind of ebbs and flows with certain things, and hopefully you guys have experienced and Jason, we've talked about this on the podcast, is that there seems to be a reorientation in our culture towards spiritual things, and that people are more open to the idea of certain things, and particularly to the Christian worldview. And we talk specifically about that in a couple episodes, most recently where we spoke of the passing of Charlie Kirk, and we spoke of it in that context, and there seems to be legitimate momentum in that direction. So you might be thinking, well, you know, that's fine. This seems kind of technical. This might seem kind of academic. This stuff is very practical because these are the things that we need to be equipping ourselves so that we can communicate these things to the people that need to know. And this is one of the benefits of something like apologetics or even theological studies, is the more that you equip yourself with these concepts, your faith grows stronger. You become more convinced of what's really real, of what the truth is. And that's a good thing. The roots grow deeper and stronger in your own faith. But you're also, in the analogy that I've used, and I've used this in my recent class in apologetics, is, of course, I'm going to bring it back to something nerdy. The Marvel character Hawkeye. You guys know that guy? Right? What's his primary thing? Yeah, he's an archer, right? And that guy's got an arrow for everything. I mean, it's like, how in the world and he knows exactly where it is too. My favorite one it's like whatever one he grabs is like the perfect arrow for what he's about to do. My favorite one's in the original Avengers movie when he gets taken over by Loki, right? He loses control of his own faculties, and they're taking over this helicarrier thing in the sky, and he shoots. Yeah, you love it. You're loving this. Yeah, this is all for you, man. All right. And he shoots an arrow that has a USB drive on the end of it right into the USB port. Yeah, you can't, yeah. No matter which way you turn it, you can't get the stupid thing to go in there, right? And so, but, you know, the analogy here is that we're going to encounter all sorts of people, all sorts of situations, all sorts of different backgrounds. And our goal then, as worldview missionaries, is to equip ourselves with every arrow possible. Those things just don't find their way in there. You got to put them in there. And you need to understand, okay, I'm going to be around these folks that think this way, so I need to understand how they think and then be able to communicate with them in a real way. Jason brought up Athens. When Paul went to Athens, he did this. He pulled out the right arrow. And you notice, and you made the point, and I hope you all picked up on this. Did you hear how many scriptures that Paul quoted in Athens? How many did Jason say? Were you listening? 0. Very good. Right? And so there's a reason he did that. It just wasn't because he's like, I don't care about the scriptures here. It's because those people had no regard for it. Now, but what was his MO in other places? What arrow did he use? When what was his regular way that he operated when he went, he went a lot of places. But he would go where? Okay, he would go to their culture, but where would he usually head first when he got into town? He'd go to the synagogue, right? And so we find there that when he went to the synagogue, he didn't use the secular poets of the day in the synagogue. They didn't. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but that's not what he used. That wasn't his arrow of choice. What was? The scriptures. He reasoned with them from the scriptures. The great chapter that illustrates all these different arrows is Acts chapter 17, where he starts out in Thessalonica and he pulls out the arrow of reasoning from the scriptures and showing them that Jesus is the Christ through fulfilled prophecy. They cared about this because they had that was their worldview, that was their background, that was their understanding. He reasoned from where they were to take them to where they need to be. And so as worldview missionaries, that's our goal. And so we need to, in this culture, in this world, we need to be able to equip ourselves with with as many arrows as we can if we want to be effective for Christ. So there was a time in this world, not long ago, well, I say that, but 1980s is a long time ago. Feels, in my head it was yesterday, right? In my head it was like not long ago, but 25, 20. That's like 30, 40 years ago. Yeah, well, I'm working towards the end of the decade. 89. Yeah. George Bush, the first one, right? Those years. You could set out in your neighborhood, knock on a door, have your Bible in your hand, and someone would say, hey, let's sit here on the porch, we'll get some tea, and we'll talk about the Bible, because there was a general respect. They understood what God's Word was to some extent, and you could have a conversation about that. And there was some common ground. There were some things you could work with. We're not there anymore. We're not in Kansas anymore. Right? And Jason brought up the idea of we're not in Athens anymore. We're even past that. So we, as much as is that a spider? Okay, crickets don't bother me. You dirty dog. You would too. Don't hurt it. One time, I kid you not, it was a Sunday night, and I was up here on the platform, and I don't remember what I was doing, and all of a sudden, right here, and he stayed right there. Right in my view was a spider, and I was like, really, right now? Yeah, he died. So, people say I'm afraid, but I'm the one that kills them. It's right. So, we have an opportunity to be worldview missionaries, and we need to be responsible for putting those arrows in our own quiver. They're not just going to find their way there. And so that's kind of what we're doing. That's what we're hoping to do here through these talks, is to underscore what a worldview is and its importance, but then what I'm hoping to do here in a moment is to equip us with how this kind of plays out with different worldviews on certain subjects. So what we're gonna do now is take the concepts that Jason laid out and for us, and see how these manifest in and through a particular worldview systems. Now we're saying that this stuff really matters. Now hopefully now I'm going to be able to show you why this really matters. Now again, a worldview is the lens through which a person interprets and understands the world, reality. It's the comprehensive framework of beliefs and assumptions about life, about truth and God and humanity and the universe that shapes how one thinks and lives. Now, way back in our episode on starting points, by the way, starting points is code word for worldview. Way back in season 1, episode 2, we talked about how our starting points affect how we think and live. How these starting points affect what we believe about something else. One good idea leads to another good idea, or one bad idea leads to another bad idea. That's usually the way it goes. You start off with this idea, and then to be consistent, you move to the next bad idea, and then you end up with some ism. There's a lot of isms. So when we are building a worldview, we must start with good ideas. So that what is built upon these foundational ideas has a chance of surviving. We want a worldview building that will stand the test. Now, one of the things when you study this is that worldviews are looking for this thing, and this is the fancy term, they're looking for coherence. That's one thing that we want to do is like, is this entire system, does it work together? Is it coherent? And does it jive with reality? And so when you take the Christian worldview and you look through this discipline of coherence, we see that it makes the most sense of this world and everything in it. In fact, I'll go so far to say this, is if you want to understand this world and how it operates and what it really is, if you want a true understanding, your only hope is a starting point that begins with God. Without God, you have zero chance. Without God of the Bible, I should say, you have zero chance of having clarity and coherence in the way that you think. And so that's what we're going to attempt to do. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some of those questions and maybe a couple more, and we're going to look at these systems and on these certain subjects, on those questions, and see how they line up. And we'll take random ones here and there and see how it lines up. So the first one we're going to look at, this question, this worldview thing, this is very important, is what is truth? This is very important. And is it knowable? So there's different things. Some people might say, yeah, there is truth, but you can't really know it. Or they might say there's no such thing as truth, and it doesn't matter if you know it. And so when we look at the Scriptures, we see the concept of truth kind of being a little bit important. I think Jesus said something about that. You shall know the truth, and it shall make you free. He said, I am the truth. Sanctify them in the truth. Truth seems to be pretty important. So here, let's look at this. So let's compare what's called a postmodern view, or now it's actually called post-truth. So it's what was called postmodern now has developed into what's post-truth. So we've kind of moved further and further. And that's how it's being, if you hear that word post-truth, that's what this means. So the postmodern or the post-truth worldview, and these are going to be just nutshells. These are just going to be very simple, and then we'll compare it to the Christian worldview, and we just don't have time to dive deep. Each one of these things, by the way, could be a semester class at a college on the subject of truth and all of its implications. And because when you start diving deep, when you get into those fancy pants philosophers like Plato and Socrates and some of the more modern ones, that you look into this stuff and it starts to break your brain, right? And I've warned people before. I was like, be careful with this stuff, because there is such a thing as good philosophy. There is such a thing as good philosophy. Not all philosophy is bad. In fact, we need good philosophy. Bad philosophy, on the other hand, some really terrible stuff can come from it. So we want to use good philosophy here. So postmodern, post-truth worldview says this: truth is relative. So it's relative. It depends on one's personal feelings, experiences, or social perspective. So I think we would say this is characteristic of our world, our society, the people around us, right? And they use phrases like, well, that may be true for you, but that's not true for me. Or they use that idea of your truth. That's your truth. That's fine. That's good. as long as it works for you, but what works for me is something completely different. So it's this idea, ultimately, that truth is subjective. And what's true for you may not be true for me. It's subjective. And so reality is interpreted, meaning and truth are constructed by individuals or groups rather than revealed by an ultimate authority. Now listen there, that's very important. So as reality is interpreted, meaning and truth are constructed by individuals or groups. So there's nothing, in this system, when we understand what truth is, we're saying that it's all determined, created, founded, morphed, perverted, whatever words you want to use, it's all determined by the people. By people that they determine what is actual, factual, what reality is. You get to say whatever you want. Yeah, so that's why you can have a grown man with a full beard, with pretty lipstick and a dress on saying, I'm a woman. I don't have a beard. Oh, okay. He said, wait a second. That's why, now we've witnessed this, it seems like, wait a minute, you're disconnected from reality. Right? Because I don't know about you, when we have people that say that I'm a woman, that's all I got to do, that's my truth, and then I can behave as such when we know what's actual. But in a postmodern, post-truth society where there's no objective source of truth, then there's nothing for us to say, well, you're wrong. That's not actual. That's not true. Because it's the beholder that determines truth. And this is so big in this system, emotion over fact. They're driven by feelings. This is how I feel. On that subject of like transgenderism and stuff, it's not about actual biological truth. It's about how I feel. It's emotions over fact. In a post-truth culture, how one feels often matters more than what is factual or logically true. And so we see these inconsistencies in our world, and I don't know about you, it drives me nuts. Because and it also grieves me, it makes me sad as to how darkened their understanding is. And it's no wonder that Satan, and we always want to think in these terms, is what's our enemy trying to do here? What is he trying to do? Why has he's not just trying to redefine truth, he's trying to remove truth altogether. It's not just a redefinition, it's a removal. And so he removes the concept of truth. And we've already just mentioned just a couple verses. It seems like truth is very important. It's vital to a biblical worldview. So what about the Christian worldview of truth? Is it coherent? Does it make the most sense of the available evidence? Well, we would say truth is absolute. It's absolute. It exists independently of personal opinion or cultural construct. So that's such an important thing. Jesus is the Son of God. If one person believes it, or they all do, it doesn't change the fact. It has nothing to do with opinion or majority or the numbers of people who would agree with that. Truth is truth, whether someone recognizes it or not. And so in this situation, it's absolute. And so this is what it boils down to, is this idea of objective or subjective. And the way we would say this is truth is outside of us or it's within us. And if it's within us, then we get to determine it. But if it's outside, and this takes us back to the fundamental understanding of that we're going to talk about here in just a moment, is all there is it natural, material, or is there something supernatural? And so you hinted at this. You spoke of in philosophical terms, they talk about this as being a closed system, like a box, or an open system. And so, if all there is material, if all there is this box and everything in it, the universe and everything in it, us, the trees, my crazy dog, if that's all that exists, there's nothing supernatural, there's nothing outside of this box, if it's a closed system, then we are in fact the determiners. If it's just us, then we are the determiners, we're the creators of truth. Are you with me? But if it's an open system, and there's something outside, if all there is the natural, then we're the determiners. But if there's something outside of the natural, we would say that is supernatural, then that means there's something greater than, outside of, higher than, objective. And if there is something supernatural in this system, then truth, the nature of truth changes. So in this system, truth comes from God. Don't miss this. And I'll say this very clearly, and I've refined my thinking in the way I speak about this. Truth does not exist outside of God. God doesn't exist. There's no such thing as truth. Truth flows from Him. He is truth. So it's revealed through the Scriptures. So this is so important. So we said what truth is. It's objective. It's bound up in God's nature. God is truth. It's outside of us. So the question then is, because we just said a little while ago, how can we know truth? This is so important. And in fact, the Christian Evidences 2 class that I taught, I don't know how many of you, I know some of you probably sat in that. We spend a lot of time on that. The fancy terms, epistemology. So you could say, I've studied epistemology. Your epistemological framework is solid. Right? So you have epistemology, and so this answers the question when he was saying, what Jason was saying, we can know what we know. It's the science or the study or the philosophy of understanding how we know what we know. Can we trust what we know? And so in a world, right? Sounds like the movie things. In a world, in a universe that's God created where truth is objective, then that's a good thing. You guys realize how good that is? Because now truth is not determined by us. Truth must be revealed. And so God is the source of truth. And here's the beautiful thing. God has communicated to His creatures. And we'll talk about this a little bit more as we move forward. God has chosen, and this is awesome, and I think, what's the analogy that you used, that He's not out playing golf? There wasn't, deism says, one of these isms says that there was a creator that wound up the clock and then just hit the course and just left. We have evidence that God is very personally involved with His creation, which separates us from a deistic perspective. But God has chosen specifically to reveal Himself to us. He's written 2 books. Did you know that? Did you know God wrote 2 books? Because everybody's like, well, what are those 2 books? What? New Testament, Old Testament? All right. Maybe. We could say maybe in the Bible we have 66 books that are contained in 1 volume. But in a broader sense, what 2 books has He written? Okay. What's that? Creation and Word revelation. So these 2 books. So God has revealed Himself through creation. Romans 1 tells us that, right? Psalms 19 tells us that we can know certain things about God because of creation. And so truth is knowable because these things about God, His eternal attributes, are known through creation. God has revealed Himself to us. So we have the capacity to understand some things. Not everything, though. Creation only tells us so much. We really need something more. And here's the really cool part. God, the God of the Bible, has revealed Himself specifically in and through Word revelation. He's created us. We'll talk about this in a minute, about who is man. with the capacity to understand words. You know, we're like, okay, a kid learns his first words, right? That's pretty cool. But the fact that we are speaking, word-using people is one of the most important facts of our existence. Because God has told us so much through word revelation. He has given His creatures an opportunity to know a whole lot of truth through those 2 books that He's written. And so truth it comes from God, and it's knowable because God's created us that way. But also truth is consistent and objective. It doesn't change. When that's such a good thing to know what something is, to know that it's true, that it's reliable, consistent, that we know certain things. Like, what if gravity was just like on and off, like somebody's working a light switch, and we didn't know who was? Well, what would our world? Well, how would that feel? I mean, it would not be good, right? I mean, you know what's that? It could be fun, or it could be disastrous. Right? I mean, and so, but this consistency of something like gravity, which is objective and consistent at all times, so what is true remains true for all people in all times because it's rooted in God's unchanging nature. I love this. Don't miss on this. So if this is the case, this is what it boils down to. So the human role in this, we do not create truth, we discover it. There's never a time when you create truth. You discover it. You pursue that which has been revealed in order to know what is really real. In a subjective sense, they say, no, you create truth. You determine. You know what that makes you? It makes you God. There's a big difference between these 2 systems. So, to sum this up, the Christian worldview sees truth as God-given and unchanging. That's good, right? Doesn't that seem to make sense? While the postmodern, post-truth worldview sees truth as personal and flexible. I don't want to live in a world like that. You know why I don't want to live in a world like that? Because if there is no objective truth, then the only game in town is power. And who holds the power then determines what is true. And depending on who's in power, it could be really ugly. He who wields the sword, if they don't have an objective source of truth, it can be a pretty ugly world. So, people, we should all desire a world that is governed by objective truth. So the Christian worldview sees truth as God-given and unchanging, while the postmodern truth, post-truth world sees truth as personal and flexible. All right, in Christianity, you can write this down. Truth defines people. In postmodernism, people define truth. That's pretty good. I didn't come up with that, but that's pretty good. I ought to say I did, but I didn't. All right, so on the subject of truth, just kind of skirting over the top of it, there is such a thing as objective truth. That's part of the Christian worldview. We say that objective truth exists, and it's bound up in God's nature, and our job is to discover truth. So what is the nature of reality then? What's really real? How do we understand this? And so when we talk about reality and our universe and all this kind of stuff, what does the atheist or the materialist say? We already touched on this a little bit, right, about this closed system. So the atheist, on the question of what is the nature of reality, would say that reality is physical only. Now, I want you to really think about that for just a moment. Our existence is consistent with just physical, with matter, chemical reactions, electrical impulses. Is our existence characterized by only the physical? It seems like there's something more to human beings than just the physical, right? How does an atheist explain love? Does love exist for the atheist or the materialist if all there is the physical? How does it work? So to say the fact that I would willingly lay down my life to protect my family is just an electrical impulse, is just the product of one domino knocking over the other? Well, that seems kind of vapid and lame, doesn't it? I'm just a product of my stimuli? That's not love, is it? To say that you have this affection and connection and meaning and relationship, there seems to be something greater than just the material. I mean, I think most people would recognize that there's something greater than just material. And I think most people would do that. So a truly atheistic, materialistic worldview, it's pretty hopeless. It's pretty basic. It's deterministic's the fancy term, meaning that really you're just the sum total of the stimuli and then the response of to the stimuli in your environment. And really, when it comes to doing something right, you have no choice. When it comes to doing something wrong, you have no choice. Free will's out the door. And that seems to be very inconsistent. It's not coherent. So they would say reality is physical only. Everything that exists is made up of matter, energy, and natural forces. There's no spiritual realm. There's nothing outside the box. There's no God. There's no soul or supernatural world beyond what science can observe. They would say this: everything follows natural laws. Life, thought, morality are products of evolution, chemistry, and physics. There's no divine purpose. So where does the meaning come from then? Well, if meaning in this system has to come from where? Okay? It comes from us. We get to determine what meaning is. By the way, we're not really good at that. If we try to determine what true meaning and purpose is for humans, it doesn't usually work very well. So meaning comes from humans. People must create their own purpose and values within the physical universe. So then you have someone, we'll get to this on the question of ethics, that says, you know what? These people that look like that, they're not valuable to society, and it actually would be better for us, and it would make me quite happy if we just got rid of those folks. In fact, I think it would be beneficial and moral and good if you're not blonde-haired and blue-eyed. I don't have any hair, but I got blue eyes. I can go to, what's that, Clairol? What's the stuff for men? Just for men? I can go blonde if I need to. And a certain skin color, like, it's better if we just gather y'all up and kill you. You know what? And that's good. No one's ever done that. So if people create their own purpose and values within the physical universe, it usually ends up pretty bad. So what's the Christian worldview say about the nature of reality? Well, reality includes both the physical and the spiritual. God created the universe, so both the material and the immaterial spiritual realms are real. Remember, we've been talking a lot about this lately. The book of Revelation, you cannot get around it. The spiritual realm is real. Right? Remember, we say that John is time and time again, he's pulled back the curtain. And we've referenced the account with Moses and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu, those knuckleheads, on the mountain, and these elders, when they got to peek into that spiritual realm. We've referenced the spiritual realm with Elisha. I always get this wrong. Is it Elisha? I'm telling you, I'm going to tattoo on. It's one of my favorite passages. I can never remember those two guys. Where the servant got to see what Elisha could see in the chariots, right? The spiritual realm's real. It's really real. It's not a story. It's part of ultimate reality. It's just as real as you and I in this right here. The ultimate reality is God. Everything exists because of Him, and all reality depends on His will and purpose. Human life, then, think about this: if it's an objective source, if there's the supernatural, then it seems like maybe human life has meaning, but it has divine meaning, and that's better because it's objective meaning. It's not determined or created by me. There's meaning and purpose that's defined by some objective source. Then it seems like that's a good thing. See, people are made in God's image. One of the most important verses in all the Bible, by the way. We'll talk about that in just a moment. People are created in God's image, giving life spiritual significance and moral grounding. The unseen is just as real as the seen. Realities like the soul, heaven, angels, and sin exist even if they can't be measured by science. Guys, science is not the end-all, be-all. It's a good tool. It's a good tool that can help us to understand the universe that God has created. In fact, this is something I firmly believe. The more that science progresses, the more they reveal the mind and the power of God. The further these satellites go out into space, it just tells me, man, God's even more awesome than we understood. Or the farther that the microscope gets into the inner workings of a single cell, that just reveals the mind and power of God. Thank you, scientists, for doing that. Science is a tool, and depending on your worldviews, how you would use that tool. So, in short, materialism says reality is only matter. Christianity says reality is both matter and spirit, created and sustained by God. All right, what about this question? Who is man? Great question. And so we talk about this world that we live in, and people ask this question, well, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? All this stuff. Darwin, the naturalistic or materialistic perspective, says that man is the product of natural processes, specifically evolution through natural selection. So basically, humanity is not distinct from any other life form. So what's this mean for us? Who are we ultimately? We're what? We're animals. You're an animal. You're an animal. Animal. I mean, that seems like, and Jason said earlier, if you tell people they're animals from a young time, then that's how they're going to act. They're going to work according to their base instincts, because that's what they're told who they are. If there's nothing objective outside of them, then I'm just going to pursue what feels good. And so this system, the key points here: origin, humans evolved from lower life forms. I like the way Frank Turk says it: from the goo to you via the zoo. From the goo to you via the zoo. Yeah. So nature, so man is a biological organism governed by the same natural laws as all living things. Consciousness, morality, and reason are viewed as the product of the brain's evolution. And it just makes you useful for survival and reproduction. Just live and reproduce, eat and die. That sounds good. Your purpose? What's the purpose then in this closed system where there's nothing objective? What's the purpose then? There's no inherent purpose or divine design, meaning and morality or human constructs that develop through social and biological evolution. So what's our destiny then? You know what your destiny is? And I'll give credit to a guy like, who's the British dude? Loves Christians. Well, not Bill Nye, he's not British. No, not Russell Brand. Who'd you say? Yeah, Richard Dawkins. Thank you. I was being sarcastic. He hates us, by the way. He's consistent. I mean, I got to give him credit. He's consistent. If you ask him what's the end of man and what's the purpose and all this kind of stuff, he'll say absolutely nothing. It's blind. It's just death and then ceasing to exist, and basically while you're here, there's no inherent purpose. I mean, he's very honest in it, in his conclusions. He tries to say, if this is the case, he tries to be coherent. But still, that's not a world that I want to live in. What then would that mean when I come upon something difficult, like disease or the death of a loved one? How do I make sense of all that? Or someone else hurts me? How do I make sense of all that if that's just the world? I mean, that's a dark place to be. And that's what he says. It's a dark world it's a dark place to be and a place to live if his conclusions are correct. Oh, well, what about the Christian worldview on this question of who is man? Well, from the Christian perspective, man is a unique creation of God. Don't miss that. Unique creation. We say all things are created, but man's unique. When we talk about man being the crown of creation, there's something very special. This is what I love about apologetics. This is one of my favorite things. There's these things that are called anthropic constants. Some of you have heard me use this term. Anthropic. What word do you hear there in anthropic? Anthropology. Anthropology is the study of man. So anthropic, anthropos, anthropic means that these are the conditions, these constants that need to be there for man to live and survive, these anthropic constants. So one of those would be the oxygen level. So if we have a certain amount of oxygen in the atmosphere, if it's too much, what would happen to this planet? If there was too much oxygen in this world, so when Kelly lights up her cigarette, we're all going to burn to death. Right? Right? So the world would combust. Too much, not enough oxygen, what would happen? We would suffocate. So there's just this narrow window where this constant exists for life to exist. And so another one of those, we talked about gravity. Gravity is amazing, by the way. The anthropic constant with gravity is this. You take a decimal, and then you put 21 zeros after the decimal. 21. Now, each time you get further away from the decimal, you're getting what? Smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. 21 zeros, and then a 1. So if gravity were that much to increase by that much, everything would implode. The universe would implode upon itself. If it were to decrease by that much, everything would fall apart. There's so many different constants that we can look at. In fact, scientists keep adding these things. There's about 120 recognized anthropic constants right now. That these conditions have to be exactly the way they are for life to exist on this planet. You're probably like, I didn't come here to hear all this science, right? Just hang with me. So when you take one of those constants and you say, what's the chance that that constant exists here in this place for life? What's the chance? Okay, 1 in a million for that constant. You know, that people win the lottery, right? It's possible. But then when you take another one of those constants next to it, you got to take that 1 in a million times this 1 in 10 million. And then you take the next constant and you multiply that times 1 in 1,000. And you take that constant, the next one that comes, and you multiply that. Well, that one's 1 in 50. And the next one's 1 in 1 million. And you multiply, you multiply, you multiply. By the way, there's 120 of these. Each time you add another constant, the chance that this earth exists in exactly this way by accident is off the charts impossible. The point is this, that this earth exists to support human life. In fact, these constants actually have to do with the nature and structure of the entire universe. What I'm saying is this universe exists for you, for human life. You are the crown of all creation. And then God created man in His image to explore and understand His world and the truth that He is revealed to mankind, so that He can have a relationship with man. And so now, what does meaning and purpose look like now? It's off the charts, right? You have incredible value as a creature of God created in His image. You have incredible meaning and purpose and destiny and all this stuff that's tied to that because you are created in the image of God. That's one of the most important verses in all the Bible. when we find people that have a naturalistic, materialistic worldview, they're usually pretty dark place. If you really sit down and talk to them for a minute, you're going to find out, man, I don't know what I'm doing in this world. I'm lost. I have no meaning. I don't know why I'm here. But then if you sit down and explain to them exactly what God has done, and if we can get them to the point that they understand that this is a God-created universe, and if they're creatures created in His image, it changes everything. That's a good arrow to have, who is man, because then it changes everything. So the Christian worldview, man is a unique creation of God, created in His image. That phrase is imago Dei. That's a good one. With both physical and spiritual dimensions. Humanity was designed, we're designed for a relationship with God. You know, we love our pets and animals, right? Some of us have really close affection for our animals. They weren't designed for a relationship with God. You are. God has designed us so that He can have relationship with us, that we would be His children, His family. That's an incredible purpose. And so humanity was designed for relationship, to reflect His character and steward His creation. So the origin, man was created intentionally and purposefully. Nature, humans, our body and soul, were dualistic creatures. They possess rationality, morality, creativity, and relational capacity. Purpose, humans' purpose is to know, love, and glorify God, and to care for creation responsibly. Our destiny, man is eternal. You're eternal. Did you know that? You're going to live forever. That's pretty cool. I guess it just depends on where. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. I need to check something here real quick. All right. We're never going to get through this. All right, let's look at one more. Which one do you think we should look at? How about this one? What is the problem with this world, and what is its solution? And Jason alluded to this. This is where he was talking about the puzzle pieces. Right? The puzzle pieces and the yardstick. And you're separating out the pieces. What's the problem with this world, and what's the solution? Depending on how you define that, it really changes everything. So, what's wrong with this world? Well, our friends, the cultural Marxists, there's been a lot. You're like, here at Kent we talked a lot about this, right? We're going back in the Wayback Machine around 2021. 2020 hit, right? And you're kind of like me. It's like, what in the world's going on? These people have lost their minds. And what are all these words? I don't understand all this stuff. All these words they were using, and I was troubled. And so I was like, well, we're gonna figure this out. So I spent about a year figuring it out, and understanding the worldview that is cultural Marxism and everything about it. Well, if you haven't figured out anything outside of a Christian worldview, it's not good. This one's really not good. So it ties in some other things, but in cultural Marxism, without getting too much in the weeds on everything else. So how do they identify the problem with this world? So cultural Marxists would say, here's the problem, this idea of oppression. Right? So there's people in this world, you fit one of two categories. Everything's categories. You're one or two. People are basically in one of two categories. You're either the oppressed or the oppressor. Right? And so everything operates from that perspective. So that means you got to figure out which category you are. So I'm going to help some of you out today, and you're going to love this. So in our society today, cultural Marxism says, okay, here's how we define who's the oppressed and the oppressor. So this started way back with Karl Marx. He started with one primary place and thing to determine who the oppressed and the oppressors were. He started with what? You guys remember? What was his fundamental principle? What did he start with? How did he define the two groups? I think I heard you say it too. Rich and poor. Yeah, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, right? The haves and the have-nots. And the haves, you're an oppressor. And all the problems that exist in society are because some people have money and some people don't. So he decided to try to fix things that way. Well, those who would take the ideas of Marx said, well, that's not enough. It's much more than that. And so they start adding all these different categories. And by the time you come to 2020 in the United States, here's the categories. Are you ready? All right, male and female. So gender. So if you're male, you're the oppressor. Some of you are going to love this. Right? And so that was one of the categories. So females, you're oppressed. You're all oppressed. Poor females. You can't do anything for yourselves. You're oppressed. That's what they would say. So you ever wondered that? Okay, you want a good example of that? Have you ever noticed how they define in the political cycles that females are a minority? That's how they categorize as, I'm like, wait a minute. If you really look at it, I think the statistics are just slightly in favor of that. There's more women than men, so how in the world are they a minority? Oh, well, through this lens. This lens says you're a minority. You're oppressed. Here's another one. If you're white, oppressor. You're bad. So white men, you're bad. Real bad. Here's another one. Or if you're anything other than white, you're oppressed. So non-whites, you're oppressed. If you're white, you're the oppressor. Another one is if you're straight. If you're heterosexual. So anything other than heterosexual, those are the oppressed. So if you're a heterosexual white male, you're evil. Here's another one. This cisgender. I was like, what in the world is cisgender? I never heard that word before. Basically, is if you are what your plumbing says you are, to be a little crass. If you identify with what you are, you're cisgender. So a white male, cisgender, heterosexual, you're oppressor. And also if you have money, if you're wealthy, you're an oppressor because there are the poor. Here in America, if you are a citizen of America, you oppress those who are not. So those who are not, if you're a natural-born citizen, you're an oppressor. Those who are not, so basically you, white man who love your wife. Oh yeah, and another one that's a big one that they won't put out there as much is if you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, you're an oppressor. So guess what, guys? Now some of you you ladies are oppressors in other ways. But really, they determine that the epitome of evil. So how do we fix the problem? So that's the problem. They say that's the problem. Then how do we fix it? Well, they say the cause is this. The society is divided into groups. Oppressors and oppressed as dominant groups maintain control through culture, economics, and ideology. The focus, evil, is external and structural in systems, traditions, religion, and institutions. The result is social injustice. So the goal to fix things is to pursue social justice. And inequality are perpetuated by cultural norms, capitalism, patriarchy, and religion. So what's the solution? In this system, they say is liberation through social revolution and cultural reprogramming. So these revolutions need to take place in order to break down the oppressor's power and then kind of get everybody on an equal playing field, which they fail to recognize in this system. There's never a time when someone's not the oppressed. So there's always an oppressor in their system, and there's always an oppressor, and this is just a repeating cycle, and this always manifests in violence eventually. So eventually here's how they say it. You got to dismantle oppressive systems, economic, religious, and moral. So they seek to destroy the things that perpetuate this power. So they just seek to destroy the family. The family is one of the ways that these oppressors keep their power going, is through the family. So they seek to dismantle and destroy the family. I don't know about you, but the family's a good thing, right? They seek to destroy the nuclear family. They also seek to destroy religious systems like Christianity. So it's just destroy, destroy, dismantle, destroy. And that never ends up well. So that's their solution. All right, so what about Christianity? Christianity says the root problem, what's wrong with this world? It's a 3-letter word. It's sin. Humanity's rebellion against God. That's the problem. So the cause takes us to, where do we find the cause of sin in our world? Where do we find that? We find that in Genesis. Chapter 3, and we see the fall of man and everything that happens as a result of that. So evil, the focus, stems from the human, our own hearts. People are sinners in need of redemption. So the result in this world, the problem, yes, injustice exists, inequality exists. Yes, oppression exists because of selfishness, pride, and separation from God. Romans 3:23, all have sinned, fall short of the glory of God. Everybody in the world has sinned, and that's the problem in this world. So those are the problems, then the solutions. What's the solution in Christianity? Is it destroy, dismantle? Is that the concept there? No. It's salvation through Jesus Christ. So what happens there? And Jason talked about this. It's through inner transformation and repentance and forgiveness and restoration through faith in Christ. So the means is the gospel changes individuals, and individuals changes families, and families change communities, and communities change societies. The only hope for a society that is civil and one where the problem is fixed, if we want to say it's the sin's effect upon this world, is through the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a person-by-person, ground roots kind of a situation. That's our only hope. But if we say it's the other way around, it's a top-down system of destroying and dismantling, I don't want to live in that world. Because eventually, I'm going to be the oppressed, and guess what? That means I get to take part in a revolution and take someone else down? I don't want to be a part of that. How about we recognize what is really real? So our goal in this is reconciliation with God and others. Reconciliation that happens vertically and then horizontally, it's only possible through the gospel. It's a new creation where righteousness reigns. So to sum up there, the Christian worldview is sin in the human heart, rebellion against God. Moral and spiritual redemption is through Christ. It's the individual. The focus of the change is individual to the outward, to the families. And the end goal is reconciliation and eternal life with God. If you look at every one of these, the exact opposite is found in cultural Marxism. Oppression is found in social systems. There's a power imbalance and inequality. The evil source is structural and political. The solution is revolution and cultural change. The focus of change is society and institutions. It's outward down to the individual and the inward. And the end goal is utopian equality and justice on earth. That'll never happen outside of Jesus Christ. So, these fundamental questions and how we answer them really matter. Because in a world where we don't recognize biblical principles and those foundational building blocks as an evil, dark place. So we have a great responsibility as worldview missionaries to put these arrows in our quiver so that when you come across someone that says, you know what's wrong with this world, man? The oppressor. You'd be like, no, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's really going on here and what's really real. And so hopefully today is not going to put every arrow in your quiver, but maybe it would encourage you to start down that road. Because it takes effort. And so I want to encourage you is find something that can continue to equip you, your church, in the studies that you involve in. When you go to the CRA Podcast Network, you'll find good resources to equip you in this work as a worldview missionary. And so you have to be actively engaged in filling that quiver. And so hopefully today you've continued. I know some of you have already got a good quiver. I know you do. And it's got a lot of good arrows in it. But I don't care who you are, we can always add one more arrow in there to be better equipped to take the gospel of Jesus Christ. As we just said, our only hope for any kind of true change in this world is through the gospel of Jesus. And so I want to encourage you to be a worldview missionary. Thank y'all. All right. It's lunchtime. So give us a few minutes as